Millionaire marries a woman on a bet, but a hidden photo in his home changes everything when he sees it. He thought it was all a game, but a secret from his past resurfaced and turned his world upside down. "You wouldn't dare," Jordan said, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. The private dining room buzzed with the chatter of high society elites, but Alex had only one focus now: proving his superiority. Alex smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Watch me." "Fine," Jordan challenged, clinking his glass against Alex's. "Here's the deal. You marry her, stick it out for 6 months, and I'll donate $1 million to any charity you choose. But if you back out, you match the donation." The table erupted in laughter, their disbelief fueling Alex's pride. He thrived on risk, on pushing limits, and Jordan had just handed him the perfect opportunity to show everyone who ran this circle. "It's a deal," Alex said, extending his hand. Jordan clasped it firmly, sealing the agreement. Across the room, Helena paused, sensing the weight of eyes on her. She didn't belong here. She'd only taken the catering job to pay her mother's mounting medical bills. Her simple black dress and apron marked her as an outsider, but she carried herself with quiet dignity, determined to finish her shift unnoticed. "Helena, isn't it?" Alex's voice was smooth, practiced. He approached her with a confidence that felt like an ambush. She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" "Actually, yes." He studied her face, the unpolished but striking features that set her apart from the polished, interchangeable women he usually surrounded himself with. "I have a proposition for you." Helena's brow furrowed. "I'm working. This won't take long," Alex said, stepping closer. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "I doubt that." She turned to leave, but he blocked her path. "Hear me out. I'm willing to pay you enough to cover any financial troubles you're dealing with." He gestured toward the lavish surroundings. "I can afford it. All I ask is that you marry me." The words hung in the air, absurd and audacious. Helena stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "This isn't funny. I'm serious," Alex said. 6 months. No strings attached. You walk away with enough to change your life." She folded her arms. "What's the catch?" "No catch," he lied smoothly. "Just think about it." Helena's instinct was to refuse outright, but the weight of her responsibilities pulled her back. Bills piling up, her mother's declining health. She needed help, and this man was offering a lifeline, even if it came wrapped in arrogance. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her tone clipped. Alex's smirk widened. "Good. I'll see you tomorrow." As he walked away, Helena's stomach churned. Whatever his game was, she knew it came with consequences. But could she afford to say no? Helena sat on the edge of her small, worn-out couch, the dim light of her modest apartment casting long shadows on the walls. In her hand, she held Alex's business card. The bold, embossed letters seemed to mock her, daring her to step into a world far removed from her own. She hesitated, running her fingers over the smooth edges, as if the answer to her dilemma might reveal itself through touch alone. Her phone sat on the coffee table, the screen dark but heavy with the weight of an impending call. With a deep breath, she picked it up and dialed the number. It rang once before Alex answered, his voice smooth and confident. "Helena, I knew you'd call." His certainty grated on her nerves, but she pushed past it. "Don't get ahead of yourself," she said, keeping her tone sharp. "I'm calling to understand what exactly you're proposing. If I agree, what do you expect from me?" 6 months, Alex replied without hesitation. "You'll attend social events with me, live in my home, and present yourself as my wife. Think of it as a partnership. You gain financial stability. I fulfill my part of an agreement." Helena frowned. "What kind of agreement requires you to marry someone you barely know?" "That's not your concern," he said smoothly. "You won't be involved in that part of it. Just appearances. It's a business arrangement, nothing more." The matter-of-fact tone in his voice unsettled her. "What about my life? My work? My family?" "You won't need to work during the arrangement," Alex said. "You'll have access to whatever you need. Your family's needs will also be taken care of. Medical bills, housing, whatever you require." His words hung in the air, both a promise and a trap. Helena's logical side screamed at her to hang up. This man was offering a lifeline, but at what cost? Yet, the unpaid bills and her mother's declining health left little room for pride or caution. "Let's say I agree to meet and discuss this further," she said cautiously. "What guarantees do I have that you'll keep your word?" "My reputation," Alex said, his voice tinged with amusement. "I don't break deals." Helena wanted to challenge him, to push back against his arrogance, but her exhaustion won out. "Fine, I'll meet you. Tomorrow." "Excellent," Alex said. 7 o'clock. "I'll send a car to pick you up." The line went dead before she could reply. She set the phone down and leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her chest tightened with a mixture of dread and hope. Tomorrow would either be the start of something new or a mistake she couldn't undo. For now, all she could do was wait. The grand hall buzzed with activity. Waiters moved swiftly between tables, arranging crystal glasses and pristine silverware. Helena stood at the far end, adjusting the hem of the modest white dress Alex had provided. She felt like an imposter in a story that wasn't hers, the gown too perfect, the setting too extravagant. Yet here she was, moments away from marrying a man she barely knew. "Ready?" Alex's voice startled her. He appeared in the doorway, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, exuding the confidence of someone who belonged in this world. His expression revealed nothing, a mask of calm indifference. Helena nodded, swallowing her nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be." Alex stepped closer, his eyes briefly scanning her face. "You'll do fine. Just remember, this is a performance. Smile, say your lines, and we'll both get what we want." Her jaw tightened. "Is that all I am to you? A prop in your act?" He smirked, but there was no humor in his eyes. "You agreed to this, Helena. Don't forget why you're here." The weight of her mother's hospital bills flashed in her mind. She straightened her shoulders, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Let's get this over with." The ceremony was brief, efficient, and devoid of sentiment. The officiant's words blurred in Helena's ears as she stood beside Alex, her hand cold in his. She caught glimpses of the guests, an audience of strangers dressed in designer gowns and sharp suits, their faces alight with curiosity and speculation. When the vows came, Alex delivered his lines with a confidence that bordered on theatrical. Helena's words, though steady, felt hollow. Every syllable reminded her of the surreal nature of this arrangement. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, a polite applause rippled through the room. Alex leaned in, brushing his lips against her cheek, a gesture more obligatory than affectionate. The reception began immediately after. Helena sat at the center of a long, ornate table, flanked by Alex and a sea of unfamiliar faces. Conversation swirled around her, filled with laughter and champagne toasts. Alex played his role flawlessly, engaging guests with charm and wit. Helena, meanwhile, struggled to keep up, her discomfort growing with each passing minute. "Mrs. Montgomery," a woman across the table said, her tone saccharine. "You must feel so lucky." Helena stiffened at the title. "It's certainly a change," she managed, forcing a tight smile. Alex, catching the exchange, leaned toward her. "Smile more," he whispered through clenched teeth, his tone low but firm. "They're watching." Helena's fists clenched under the table. This was what she'd signed up for, a charade, a 6-month performance. But as the evening wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing herself in the process. Later, when the guests had left and the lights dimmed, Helena retreated to her room, the room Alex had assigned her. She closed the door, leaning against it as exhaustion washed over her. The gown felt suffocating, a reminder of the life she'd just stepped into. Across the hall, Alex's voice echoed faintly as he spoke on the phone, his words too muffled to make out. She wondered if he felt anything at all, regret, guilt, even the faintest hint of humanity. For Helena, the reality was clear. This wasn't a marriage. It was a transaction, and she was just another piece in Alex's game. But as she stared at her reflection in the gilded mirror, she made a silent vow to herself. She might play along, but she wouldn't let this world consume her. Helena woke up early, the soft light of dawn barely illuminating the luxurious room around her. She sat up slowly, the unfamiliar opulence feeling suffocating rather than comforting. The events of the previous night, the wedding, the reception, and the endless small talk, swirled in her mind like a storm. She felt like a stranger in her own life. Downstairs, Alex was already seated in the dining room, dressed impeccably as always. A cup of coffee rested in front of him, untouched, as he scrolled through his phone. Helena hesitated at the doorway before stepping in. "Good morning," she said cautiously. Alex looked up briefly, offering a curt nod. "Morning. I hope you're ready for today." "For what exactly?" she asked, taking a seat across from him. "Lunch with my investors," he said matter-of-factly. "You'll need to look the part. Don't worry about speaking much. Just smile, be pleasant, and everything will be fine." Helena felt a flicker of annoyance at his tone. "Anything else I should know? Should I rehearse lines too?" Alex's lips curved into a faint smirk. "No need for sarcasm. It's simple. You play your role, and I'll play mine." She bit back a retort, reminding herself of the stakes. This wasn't about him. It was about her mother, the bills, and the promise of a better future. Still, the way he spoke to her made her wonder if he even saw her as a person. The lunch was held at an upscale restaurant, the kind Helena had only seen in magazines. The investors were older men in sharp suits, each radiating authority and wealth. Alex introduced Helena with a practiced charm, his hand resting lightly on her back as he guided her through the room. "This is Helena, my wife," he said smoothly. "She's been my greatest supporter." Helena forced a smile, acutely aware of the curious eyes studying her. She felt like an exhibit on display, her every movement scrutinized. One of the men, an older gentleman with silver hair, leaned forward. "And how did you two meet?" Helena hesitated, unsure of what to say. Before she could speak, Alex interjected. "Oh, it was fate," he said with a disarming smile. "She was working in an event I attended, and I knew immediately she was unique." The word hung in the air, making Helena's stomach churn. Unique. It felt more like a polite insult than a compliment. The men chuckled, their laughter grating on her nerves. As the lunch progressed, Helena stayed quiet, her forced smile growing tighter with each passing moment. Alex, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in the attention, his confidence unshakable. By the time they left, she felt drained. Back at the house, Helena headed straight to her room, shutting the door behind her. She leaned against it, letting out a long breath. She'd played her part, just as Alex had asked, but it had left her feeling hollow. Across the hall, Alex's voice drifted through the walls as he spoke on the phone. His words were too muffled to make out, but the tone was clear, confident, commanding, and entirely unaffected by the day's events. Helena sank onto her bed, staring at the ornate ceiling above her. This was her life now, a carefully constructed facade. But as much as she hated it, she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. If Alex thought she was just another piece in his game, he was about to find out how wrong he was. The ballroom sparkled with opulence, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of conversation. Helena stood near the edge of the crowd, clutching a champagne flute she hadn't touched. She felt the weight of every gaze, every whisper, as Alex's wife. It was her third event this week, and the novelty of the grand venues and designer gowns had already worn off. Alex was in his element, surrounded by a group of investors and socialites, his polished charm on full display. He gestured toward Helena, beckoning her over with a confident smile. Reluctantly, she stepped forward, bracing herself for whatever role she was expected to play next. "Here she is," Alex announced as she joined the group. "My beautiful wife, Helena. Isn't she stunning?" Helena forced a smile, the compliment feeling more like a performance than genuine admiration. The men nodded politely, their gazes assessing her, as if she were an acquisition Alex had made. One of the older men leaned in, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "So, tell me, Helena, how did Alex sweep you off your feet?" Helena hesitated, searching for the right words. But before she could answer, Alex interjected, his tone light and teasing. "Oh, it wasn't easy," he said with a laugh. "Helena is unique. Let's just say I have a taste for the unconventional." The group laughed, a polite chuckle that didn't quite reach their eyes. Helena's stomach twisted. Unique. The word echoed in her mind, its weight sinking deeper with each repetition. She glanced at Alex, but his focus was on his audience, not her. As the evening wore on, the sense of isolation grew. Every comment, every interaction felt like another reminder that she didn't belong here. When Alex turned his attention to another guest, she slipped away, retreating to the edge of the room. The cool evening air hit her as she stepped onto the balcony, a welcome reprieve from the suffocating atmosphere inside. She leaned against the railing, taking slow breaths to steady herself. The city lights stretched out before her, glittering and indifferent. "You shouldn't disappear like that," Alex's voice broke through the quiet. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of irritation and confusion. "I needed air," she replied, keeping her tone calm. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do you know how that looks? People notice when you're not by my side." Helena straightened, meeting his gaze head-on. "Maybe they'll also notice how you talk about me." Alex's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "That little joke earlier," she said, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Calling me unique, making me sound like some sort of novelty." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It was just a comment, Helena. Don't read too much into it. To you, it's just a comment. To me, it's another reminder that I'm nothing more than part of your show." Alex opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated, the words seemingly caught in his throat. For the first time, Helena saw something behind the mask he always wore, a flicker of uncertainty, even regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "We'll talk about this later," he said, finally, his tone firm. "For now, come back inside." Helena shook her head. "You go ahead. I'm staying out here." Alex lingered for a moment, his gaze unreadable, before turning and walking back inside. Alone again, Helena gripped the railing tightly, the cool metal grounding her. This was her life now, she reminded herself, a life of compromises and carefully chosen words. But as she stared out at the sprawling city below, she made a quiet vow. If Alex wanted her to play this role, he'd have to learn she wasn't a silent bystander. Not anymore. Alex sat in his study, the dim light from a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. A half-empty glass of whiskey rested on the desk in front of him, untouched for the past hour. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the occasional tick of the antique clock on the wall. Helena's words from earlier in the evening still echoed in his mind. "To you, it's just a comment. To me, it's another reminder that I'm nothing more than part of your show." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand down his face. Why had he said it? The joke, the dismissive tone. It came so naturally to him, yet it left a bitter taste this time. Memories of his childhood surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. A grand house, impeccably kept, but cold and lifeless. A father who spoke in commands. A mother who smiled for the cameras, but never at him. Everything was about appearances, about control. Somewhere along the way, Alex had adopted the same armor, a shield that now felt like a cage. The sound of soft footsteps broke his reverie. Helena was walking past his study, her shadow briefly visible under the door. She didn't stop, didn't knock, and he made no move to call her in. Yet her presence lingered, her words still cutting through the walls he had spent years building. Upstairs, Helena sat on the edge of her bed, a small suitcase open in front of her. She hadn't packed much, just a few essentials, enough to leave if she decided to. Her hands rested on her lap, trembling slightly as she stared at the empty space inside the case. This wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself. She had agreed to this arrangement out of necessity, but each passing day made her question if the cost was too high. Alex's indifference, the public charades, the constant feeling of being out of place, it was all wearing her down. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, her mother's voice came to her. "You're stronger than you think, Helena. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." The memory was a balm, a reminder of the resilience that had carried her this far. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on her door. Alex stood in the hallway, his usual confidence replaced with something she couldn't quite place. Hesitation, maybe even guilt. "Helena," He began, his voice low. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, then nodded, motioning for him to come in. He entered, glancing briefly at the suitcase before meeting her gaze. "Are you leaving?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "I haven't decided." He sat down on the chair by the window, his hands clasped tightly. "I know I've been difficult," he said after a pause. "And I know tonight didn't help. I didn't mean to hurt you, Helena. I'm not used to this. To any of this." She studied him, searching for any sign of sincerity. "You're not used to being honest?" His lips twitched in what could have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not used to someone like you. Someone who doesn't just go along with what I say. Someone who makes me think." Helena looked away, her fingers gripping the edge of the bed. "Alex, I need to know if this is all just a performance to you. If it is, then I can't stay." "It's not," he said quickly, the urgency in his voice surprising them both. "At least, it's not anymore. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try." Her eyes met his, searching for the cracks in his armor, the truth behind the polished facade. For the first time, she thought she saw it, a flicker of vulnerability, of something real. "I don't need perfection, Alex," she said softly, "but I need honesty. Without it, there's nothing here." He nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. "Then I'll start with this. I don't want you to leave. Not like this." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distance between them felt smaller, but the weight of everything unsaid still loomed large. Finally, Helena sighed and closed the suitcase. Not as a decision to stay, but as a choice to wait. "We'll see," she said quietly. "Actions speak louder than words." Alex stood, his expression unreadable, but he nodded. "I understand." As he left the room, Helena lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of control over her own story. And that, she thought, was a start. The next morning, Helena stood in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of birds outside. She stared out the window, lost in thought, her grip on the mug tightening as she replayed Alex's words from the night before. "I don't want you to leave. Not like this." The sincerity in his voice had caught her off guard, but it wasn't enough to erase the hurt. Words were easy, actions required effort, and she wasn't sure if Alex, with all his walls and defenses, was willing to put in the effort. Footsteps behind her broke her reverie. She turned to see Alex, dressed casually in a sweater and jeans, a look of uncharacteristic hesitation on his face. "Morning," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Morning," she replied, turning back to her coffee. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words. He stepped closer, leaning against the counter. "I thought about what you said last night. About honesty." Helena raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I want to try," he admitted. "I'm not good at this, at being open, but I'm willing to learn. If you'll give me the chance." She sighed, setting her mug down. "Alex, I don't need grand gestures or promises you can't keep. I just need to see that you're trying." He nodded, his expression serious. "Then let me start now. Come with me today. I want to show you something." "What is it?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "You'll see," he said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "It's better if I show you." Against her better judgment, Helena agreed. They left the house together, driving in silence until they reached a part of the city she didn't recognize. The car stopped in front of an old community center, its exterior worn but welcoming. Alex led her inside, where a group of volunteers was bustling about, setting up tables and unloading supplies. "What is this?" Helena asked, looking around. "This is one of the organizations I support," Alex said. "They run programs for underprivileged kids, helping them with schoolwork, meals, and mentorship." She looked at him, surprised. "You've never mentioned this before." He shrugged, almost sheepishly. "I don't talk about it because it's not something I do for recognition. But I thought, maybe seeing this would help you understand. I'm not just the man you see at those events, Helena. I'm more than that." Helena watched as Alex greeted the staff and helped carry boxes of supplies. The arrogance she had come to associate with him was absent, replaced by a quiet humility she hadn't expected. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it left her feeling conflicted. Later, as they left the center, Helena broke the silence. "Why didn't you bring me here sooner?" "Because I was afraid you'd think it was just another act," Alex admitted. "But last night I realized that if I don't start being honest with you, really honest, then I'll lose any chance we have." Helena nodded slowly, her mind racing. "It's a start," she said finally. "But you have a lot to prove, Alex." "I know," he said, "and I'm ready to try." For the first time in weeks, Helena felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to take one step forward. Helena stood in her bedroom later that evening, the dim light from the bedside lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The day at the community center had stirred something in her: confusion, curiosity, but also a sense of cautious hope. Yet, as she stared at the small suitcase on the bed, half filled with clothes, doubt gnawed at her. She sat down, running her fingers along the edge of the suitcase. Leaving felt like an option she couldn't ignore. The arrangement had always been transactional, a means to an end, but lately it felt like more. That terrified her. A knock at the door startled her. "Helena?" "It's me." Alex's voice came softly from the other side. She hesitated, then called out, "Come in." Alex stepped inside, his gaze immediately falling on the suitcase. A flicker of something passed across his face. Worry, regret, maybe even fear. "You're packing?" "I haven't decided yet," she said, her tone steady but tired. "I just needed to prepare myself. In case." He walked further into the room, standing a few feet away from her. "In case of what?" "In case this, whatever this is, doesn't work," Helena replied, gesturing vaguely between them. "I'm not sure I can keep doing this, Alex. The pretense, the expectations, it's exhausting." Alex sat on the chair near the window, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I know it's been hard on you. I made it harder. But today, at the center, didn't it mean something?" Helena looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "It did. Seeing you there, seeing a side of you I didn't know existed. It gave me hope. But hope isn't enough if it's not backed by change." "I'm trying," Alex said, his voice quieter now. "I know words aren't enough, but I want to show you that I'm serious about this." "About us?" She shook her head, standing and walking to the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her heart. "Alex, I don't need perfection. I just need honesty. And I need to know that you see me as more than just part of a deal." He stood as well, moving closer, but keeping a respectful distance. "You're not just part of a deal to me anymore. You haven't been for a while. I didn't realize it at first, but you've changed the way I see things. The way I see myself." Helena turned to face him, searching his eyes for any sign of deception. Instead, she found something unfamiliar: vulnerability. "If I stay, Alex, it's not because I trust you yet. It's because I want to see if you can earn that trust." "I will," he said, his voice firm. "I'll prove it to you, Helena. Whatever it takes." She nodded slowly, her decision not entirely made, but leaning in one direction. "We'll see." As Alex left the room, she closed the suitcase but didn't put it away. The journey between them was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like they were on a path that could lead somewhere real. The question was whether they were willing to walk it together. The following morning, Alex sat in his study, the early sunlight filtering through the windows. His mind was racing. Helena's words from the night before had struck a chord deeper than he expected. "I want to see if you can earn that trust." Her challenge lingered in his thoughts like a mantra. He picked up his phone, dialing a number he rarely used. "It's Alex Montgomery," he said when the line connected. "I'd like to organize something. A personal visit. Today." By midday, Alex and Helena were driving through the city. Helena glanced at him from the passenger seat, her curiosity piqued. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see," Alex replied, his tone unusually light. "I thought it was time to do something different. For both of us." The car pulled into a quiet neighborhood lined with modest houses. Alex parked in front of a small, unassuming home with a well-tended garden. Helena stepped out, looking around, trying to piece together the significance of the location. "This is where I grew up," Alex said, his voice softer than usual. He led her to the front door, unlocking it with a key that looked worn from years of use. "My parents sold it years ago, but I bought it back. I didn't want it to disappear." Inside, the house was simple and warm, a stark contrast to the grandeur of Alex's current home. The walls were adorned with old family photos, the furniture a mix of vintage and careworn. Helena's gaze lingered on a framed picture of a young boy. Alex, she realized, standing next to a woman who must have been his mother. "Why bring me here?" she asked, turning to face him. Alex ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Because I wanted you to see where I came from. Before all the money, before the walls I've built. This is where I learned what mattered. And somewhere along the way, I forgot it." Helena's heart softened as she listened, but she held her ground. "And what does this have to do with us?" Alex took a step closer, his gaze steady. "Everything. I've been trying to fix things in ways that feel safe for me, grand gestures showing off. But that's not what you need. I know I have to start with honesty. Vulnerability." He gestured around the room. "This is me trying." Helena looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "It's a start," she said quietly. "But trust isn't built in a day, Alex." "I know," he replied, "but it's built piece by piece. And I'm willing to do the work." They spent the afternoon exploring the house, sharing stories. Helena found herself opening up too, sharing pieces of her life she hadn't intended to reveal. By the time they left, the air between them felt lighter, the weight of their unspoken tension beginning to lift. As they drove back, Helena glanced at Alex, a small smile playing on her lips. For the first time, she saw not just the polished exterior of a wealthy man, but the person underneath, flawed, searching, and trying. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find something real together. The days following their visit to Alex's childhood home were different. The air between them had shifted, lighter, yet laden with unspoken possibilities. Helena watched Alex with new eyes, seeing not just the man who had hurt her, but the one who was trying to change. She wanted to believe it was real, but years of self-preservation made her cautious. One evening, Alex knocked on her bedroom door. When she opened it, he was holding a small, wrapped box. "What's this?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Something I want you to have," he said, handing it to her. His tone was nervous, almost unsure, so unlike the Alex she had first met. Helena opened the box slowly, revealing an old photo. It was a picture of his mother, holding a young Alex in front of the house they had visited. Tucked alongside it was a handwritten note. She unfolded the paper and read, "Helena, I didn't know what love looked like growing up. My mother tried to show me, but I think I was too focused on everything I thought I lacked to appreciate it. Meeting you made me realize how much I've been missing. Not things, but connections, honesty, and trust. You've given me a glimpse of what could be, and I want to spend whatever time I'm given earning your trust. Thank you for being patient with me, for showing me there's more to life than what I thought I needed. Alex." Helena looked up at him, her eyes softening. "Alex, I mean it," he interrupted gently. "Every word. I know I've made mistakes, big ones, but I'm ready to do this right. Not because of a deal or an arrangement, but because I want to. For us." Her heart ached at his vulnerability. The walls he had so carefully built seemed to crumble before her eyes. And for the first time, she saw the man he could be, the man he was trying to become. "Alex," she said quietly, holding the photo close. "I don't need perfection. I never have. I just need you to be honest, to keep trying." He nodded. "I will. I promise." Over the following weeks, they worked together, piece by piece, to rebuild not just their relationship but themselves. Alex surprised her daily, not with lavish gifts or grand gestures, but with small, meaningful actions. He started showing up at the community center regularly, helping without expecting recognition. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, and began opening up about his fears, his hopes, and the dreams he had long buried. Helena, in turn, allowed herself to trust. She shared more of her own story, her own vulnerabilities, and found that Alex was not just listening, he was learning. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of his childhood home, Helena looked at him and smiled. "I think we're finally starting to get this right." He took her hand in his, a rare softness in his eyes. "We are, and we'll keep getting it right, one day at a time." The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, they both felt ready to face it, together. It wasn't a perfect story, but it was theirs, and that was enough. This story reminds us that trust, love, and transformation aren't built overnight. They're cultivated piece by piece through vulnerability and perseverance. Alex and Helena's journey isn't just about redemption. It's about the courage to face oneself and the willingness to grow for something greater than pride or fear. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment when trust was rebuilt or seen someone change in ways you never expected? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Together, let's celebrate the power of second chances and the beauty of authentic connections.